I would like to welcome everybody to AMS Weather Band's latest webinar, Becoming a Weather Information Power User, with our esteemed panel and moderated by Erica Grochet. Before we begin, I would like to address some of the rules for our webinar today, if I may. Audience, if you have any questions during the webinar, please put them in the Q&A section. If you look at the bottom of your Zoom screen, to the left of the chat button will be a Q&A button. Any and all questions that you have for our panelists, please put them in there so that we can kind of corral all the questions in one easy to access location for our panelists and not have to hunt through comments or whatever. We will also have some specific time for questions from the audience, either during or after the interview, just depending on how it plays out. But yes, first I would like to introduce today's moderator. Erica, thank you for joining us today. Everyone, Erica is a certified broadcast meteorologist. Now, after 18 years on camera, Erica stepped behind the scenes to become the broadcast manager for the AccuWeather network in 2021. And before joining AccuWeather, she was the weekend evening meteorologist for WNBC in New York City. She has also previously served as an on-camera meteorologist for WPVI, the ABC-owned station in Philadelphia, and the WUSA, Washington, D.C. CBS station. Erica served on the AMS Council from 2019 to 2022, and she is the incoming commissioner on professional affairs. She has served as a panelist, moderator, or presenter at more than a dozen AMS conferences and symposia, so she's got a handle on this. In 2019, Erica was a delegate to the World Meteorological Organization's World Congress, and her work with the WMO continues today. Erica received the Certified Broadcast Meteorologist designation from the American Meteorological Society in 2012. She has a Bachelor's of Science degree in meteorology from Penn State University, and she was named a 125th anniversary fellow of her alma mater's College of Earth and Mineral Sciences in 2021. So with that, Erica, I give you the floor.
Thank you so much, Gideon, and thank you everyone for joining us this evening. I think we're going to have a really fun discussion, and I'm so glad to see that so many people are interested in this program. Distance learning is something that Penn State has been doing, believe it or not, since before this century. All right, so Penn State World Campus, they are pioneers in this space, so they've got it down. And the meteorology program recently added a certificate in weather forecasting, and that's what we're here to talk about today. So you see several panelists here, and one of them with the Old Main background there is Steve Seaman. Now, Steve is the director of online programs in meteorology and atmospheric science, and he's the lead faculty member for the weather forecasting certificate program at Penn State. With an educational background in both meteorology and adult education, he specializes in weather analysis and forecasting, as well as online education. He's taught courses in the weather forecasting certificate program for almost 20 years, and he has served as its lead faculty member since 2020. So once I introduce all the panelists, I'm going to ask Steve a few questions. He's also going to give a few slides to give an overview of what that program is like. But our other panelists that you see here on the screen, first, Jennifer Brooks. She's the Vice President of Quality at Infinity Pharmaceuticals and the Principal and Manager at J. Brooks Consulting. Her educational background is in toxicology, health policy, and nursing, but she pursued Penn State's weather forecasting certificate because of her lifelong fascination with weather. As she explored hobbies like storm chasing, she wanted to better understand forecasting and thunderstorm dynamics, and Jennifer completed the certificate program in 2017. So I know we have a lot of weather enthusiasts that can probably relate to Jennifer's story. John Stevens is the Knowledge and Outreach Coordinator for the IT department at James Madison University. While his educational background is in mathematics and education, John completed Penn State's program in 2021 because of his love for weather and to deepen his weather knowledge and sharpen his forecasting skills as the daybreak forecaster for WHSV in Harrisonburg, Virginia. Welcome, John. And Mike Bilder is the Hurricane Program Manager and Hurricane Liaison Team Lead for FEMA Region 3, that's the Mid-Atlantic region. With an educational background in public policy and emergency management, Mike pursued Penn State's weather forecasting certificate due to a lifelong love of weather and to deepen his knowledge of weather and forecasting products relevant to his role in FEMA, and there is a lot of overlap there, that's for sure. Mike completed the program in 2019. So those are all of our panelists that you see on the screen. Wanted to make sure everyone got their introduction. Steve, I'd like to hand it over to you now for that overview of the program. And I know you're going to share some slides with us.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, I'll share my screen here. I just want to give a little bit of background about the weather forecasting certificate. Hopefully everybody can see my screen. And first, the program has been around for a while. Actually, it was about 20 years ago, the Department of Meteorology and Atmospheric Science put its first course online. And that course eventually grew into a 4-course sequence that became the Weather Forecasting Certificate. Our department recognized decades ago that there's a lot of folks out there who are passionate about the weather. They want to learn more about the weather. And folks who have weather-related careers where they need to know more about the weather than the average person does. And so this program was designed to reach those folks, to further their weather knowledge and weather skill set that they can apply to either a hobby or to a career that they have. We had our first graduates in 2006, and we've continued to grow from there. All the courses are delivered 100% online through Penn State's World Campus. So there's not a requirement to ever come to a physical Penn State campus. Penn State has campuses all across Pennsylvania, but the World Campus, as Erica said, they've been doing online learning since the late 90s. They're always very highly ranked in delivering online courses by US News and World Report. They really do know what they're doing. They've been doing this a long time. And so has our department. We've been doing it for a couple of decades. The program is 4 courses in total. Each course is 3 credits. And these are regular Penn State courses. The credits are regular Penn State credits. So the total number of credits is 12 for the entire program. And most folks take the courses 1 semester at a time, 1 course per semester. So they would complete the program over the course of 4 or maybe 5 semesters based on their personal schedule. It would be about 1.5 years or so. The courses are designed to be asynchronous. They were designed with the fact that the audience are folks that are generally adult learners who are working different jobs, and they can't necessarily sit down at a certain time at their computer every day or every week to take a class. So they're asynchronous, so we don't have any required times where everybody has to get online together, but they are paced. They're paced along a Penn State semester schedule. You have deadlines every week or two for various materials, but within any given week, folks have flexibility to study as their schedule, as it works with their schedule. And so that works well with adult learners who are juggling jobs and family obligations, and school is something that kind of has to fit in there somehow. Our students come from a really wide variety of backgrounds. We do have a lot of students who are just really passionate about the weather. Weather is their hobby. They want to know more about it. They just love the weather. And sometimes that ends up being manifest into a specific hobby like storm chasing or storm photography. So we've had quite a few students who are interested in those types of things. We have folks who have a lot of outdoor hobbies that are very weather sensitive, things like boating and hiking. Anything that you have to do outside a lot is obviously going to be impacted by the weather. So knowing about the weather can be pretty helpful. We have aviation professionals. So we have private and commercial pilots, air traffic controllers, flight dispatchers, needing to know more about the weather and weather data to schedule flights, to make decisions about whether to fly or not. We have emergency managers who obviously have a big weather tie-in with with disaster recovery, disaster planning, and even not just public sector emergency managers, but we have folks who are in charge of maybe large outdoor events, sporting events, festivals, things that may draw tens or hundreds of thousands of people, but that are impacted by the weather, and they need to know from a safety standpoint whether it's a good thing to have this event go on. They need to know they need to know how to deal with more weather information than the average person does, and know how to make a good weather decision based on that information. We have science educators, especially at the middle and high school level, who maybe are teaching weather courses or maybe designing weather curriculums for their school. And we've had broadcasters and print journalists who are maybe communicating weather either on television or online, or writing about the weather for newspapers, magazines, digital publications. And we have folks who are into farming and agriculture, because those are obviously very weather sensitive industries. And that's just a sampling of the backgrounds of some of our students. We really have, I'm always fascinated to learn what our students do, because they do such interesting things that are in some cases not related to the weather at all, but they just really they all share a passion and an interest for the weather. The 4 courses start off with kind of an overview, understanding weather forecasting. It's the introductory course, kind of on par with what a meteorology major would take at Penn State. That's the first course. We're learning about weather observations, satellite and radar imagery, the controllers of temperature. We look vertically in the atmosphere at QT diagrams, and how high and low pressure systems work, and computer models, and some basic forecast strategies. Then we get a bit more specialized with fundamentals of tropical forecasting course, obviously very relevant even to things that have happened today, with tropical cyclones, talking about subtropical cyclones, but we also talk about larger scale climate features in the tropics like El Nino and La Nina, monsoons, and tropical circulation, Hadley cells. The mesoscale course is a big favorite with the storm chasers, those who are interested in severe weather. That's small scale weather, thunderstorms, severe weather, even other things like sea breezes, mountain valley circulations, smaller scale circulations, smaller scale weather features are covered in that class. And then we wrap it all up with a capstone experience in the final course, which is advanced topics in weather forecasting. And that's a lot of specific forecasting strategies, statistical tools, ensembles that can be useful for making forecasts and forecast decisions. But a big part of that class is a forecasting practicum environment where students are making forecasts. We actually compete in a national forecasting competition. And our students, we've had students who have won trophies in that competition, either while they're participating during the semester, or some do it even after they finish the program for fun. So they've done very well. But that's the course where it really all comes together, because students are applying everything that they've learned in the previous 3 classes to making weather forecasts. And that's a really valuable process, because you can realize just what can go wrong when you make a weather forecast. And there's a lot of things. Overall for the program, the main goals are here. And we want folks to be really savvy consumers of weather information. There's so much publicly available weather data and forecasting products from the National Weather Service, the Storm Prediction Center, the National Hurricane Center. By the end of the program, students are fluent in understanding those discussions and all of those forecast products, and that helps them to analyze current weather events. We want them to develop conceptual models of atmospheric processes, because that can be really important for making a forecast decision when there's a very uncertain forecast. Understanding those conceptual models and understanding how the atmosphere works is how you make consistently good forecast decisions, and understand what impacts or what hazards a particular weather event might bring. We want folks to be able to actually make their own forecasts of basic weather variables like temperature, wind direction, wind speed, precipitation, but even other types of forecasts. In the mesoscale course, we talk about different storm modes, what environment causes a supercell versus a squall line, how storms are going to evolve and move. So things that might be of interest to someone who is into storm chasing, or other forecast contexts. We want people to be able to apply the tools to whatever their context is. They're in everyday situations, as in their career or as their hobby, as someone who is a weather hobbyist or weather enthusiast. And to be able to use all the current tools that meteorologists use to interface with meteorologists, perhaps at their job, or to communicate weather information. A lot of times folks in these careers have responsibilities to communicate information for decisions that they have to make about the weather. And we want them to be able to use the tools correctly and to be able to communicate a clear message. So the learning experience here, I just want to say a few words about that. Online courses take a lot of forms, everything from watching recorded lectures to a whole different multimedia approach. And we try to have multiple ways to learn in the program. Every course has its own, basically like an online textbook where there's things to read and there's images, but we've also infused a lot of short videos to show examples. When we can, a lot of our instructors will have occasional Zoom sessions where they're not required because getting everybody together in different time zones with different work schedules is practically impossible. But if folks can attend, it gives them an opportunity to listen to their instructor talk about lesson material or current weather, gives them an opportunity to ask questions. And those sessions are typically recorded so that folks who can't make it real time can watch afterwards and have another component, another way to listen about current weather events or some of the lesson materials. And we also have a number of interactive animations. This is just one example here from one of our courses here. This is an interactive infrared satellite simulator. And so sometimes when we look at satellite imagery, we're often trained to think that clouds appear as white shading, or maybe on an enhanced image they have some kind of color code attached to it. And that's usually the case, but on infrared imagery, you're actually looking not just at clouds, you're really looking at temperature. And one of the things that this tool allows students to explore is the fact that you can have scenarios where the clouds don't actually look white. If you have low clouds, but outside of the cloudy area, it's a very chilly morning, you can see that the cloudy area actually looks darker. And the brighter area, or the whiter looking area, that's where it's clear. It's the opposite of what we often expect. But I think this tactile component to the learning is important. Because it allows students to kind of experiment and explore and see what kind of conditions might cause a situation that you're not quite expecting. So I think that can really help cement the learning. And just finally, it's something maybe we can pop this up again later if we need to. There is a website we have more information about the program. It's learningweather.psu.edu, and that has some sample materials, kind of like the infrared satellite explorer that I just showed, but there's other sample materials, some pieces of the lessons, and some links to the World Campus site for more information about registration and the process for getting enrolled. But that's kind of the basic overview of the program that I wanted to share. So I'll go ahead and stop sharing my screen.
Thank you, Steve. So does an applicant have to already have a college degree?
No, so the only requirement to apply and register for the program is folks do have to have completed a high school diploma or a GED. So we assume a high school science background. And so students have to have completed high school or equivalent to start the program. But we have students, some it is their first college experience, but we have students who have masters or PhDs in other fields who are just coming for weather background. So it's really all over the map in terms of educational backgrounds.
Okay, so you don't have to have any previous weather knowledge. Of course, most of the people coming into this have at least a baseline because they came to this program, but is there any kind of aptitude test or introductory quiz to assess whether a participant is ready to take this program?
No, so the big thing is having that basic high school science background is a good enough starter. And as you said, most folks coming in know a little something about the weather because of their interest in the weather. One big difference I would say between our program and say a bachelor's degree program is that there are no high-level math prerequisites for our program. The courses they're conceptually rigorous. I think our alumni who are here would attest to the fact that they are rigorous and challenging, but we don't really dive deeply into the math that you would get in a 400 level meteorology course as part of a meteorology major. So that is a difference between a degree program and a certificate program. But yeah, so there's not really a specific test that anybody has to pass or a specific level of knowledge that has to be demonstrated beyond the high school science completion.
Okay. While I have you, a couple of questions that have come into the Q&A that we can knock out right now. Let's say that someone took a couple courses through the World Campus several years ago. Can they just pick up the last two courses that they need without repeating the first two in order to get the certificate?
So that's usually, we've actually had students who have done that before, who have taken a course or two and then gone and done some other things and come back years later. And usually I encourage students to reach out to me and we'll talk about it. I mean, the credits don't expire. If you've taken one of the courses already, the credits don't expire. So it's a matter of discussing whether they feel confident that they're not too rusty to just jump back in.
Got it. Okay. And another question, does a participant need weather observation instruments?
No, there's no, we try to leverage there's so much weather observational information online. We try to leverage as much of that as we can to incorporate it into course assignments. So you don't have to have your own observation equipment.
Awesome. Okay. And finally, what opportunities exist for participants to interact with each other?
So yeah, I think interaction is a really important part of the learning process as well. And I think there's a tendency sometimes to think that maybe online learning isn't very interactive, or you can't talk to other people that much, or like it's self-study, and it certainly doesn't have to be that way. We provide a lot of opportunities in courses through discussion forums for students to talk to each other, to talk to their instructor. We try to be really responsive to questions because we are not able to sit down together in the same space at the same time. Trying to give that feedback promptly is, I think, really, really important. And we have Zoom sessions where students can interact. But one thing that has happened in some of the classes is students do tend to go through as cohorts somewhat. So they take multiple classes together and they get to know each other. And so kind of organically, I've seen study groups begin to form so that, you know, there are groups of friends basically by the end of the program who they're chatting offline about the courses and those types of things, much like what happened in any college class.
Yeah, excellent. So I think that leads really well into questions for our alumni. So why did you pursue this program? You know what, actually, before I ask that question, I want to kind of piggyback on what we were just talking about with Steve. What interactions did you have with your virtual classmates when you were in the program? Anyone who wants to start with that, just take yourself off mute. Jennifer, were you just giggling, or did you want to talk about your experiences?
Don't all jump at once, right? So I would say most of my, I graduated in 2017, which I think was before the Zoom stuff was going on, but we had a lot of interactions, and I actually became friends with some of the people in the program, even that weren't in my cohort, just by the fact that, you know, I met them and they're like, oh, I'm doing the same program. So it's led to some, you know, interactions that way, and you build the network that you have of, you know, people who are interested in the same thing that you are. So, I mean, it was kind of fun that way, but I don't know what else to say.
Okay. I was wondering if, since people are coming from all different types of disciplines, that you might learn things that aren't in your texts and in your official formal studies. Does anyone have anything that they want to share about, just anecdotally, oh, you know, a fellow participant, a fellow student came from a very different background and I learned XYZ from them? Were there any of those kind of experiences?
I guess the one thing that was sort of interesting is you meet people from all different backgrounds, like Steve said, and one of the people I remember, they introduced themselves as a former military sniper, which I thought was an interesting background for this, but I guess the weather matters. So, but you know, there were certain people had certain expertise in some areas and sometimes had experience, like I know people that had done storm surveys, damage surveys. So that sometimes was really useful to have discussions with them about things. So yeah, I mean, it really depends on the group that you're with, because sometimes there's a lot of broadcast people. I mean, it kind of varies. There's a total span of backgrounds. So
Okay.
I was actually going to say, before you said it, that there were quite a few retired military folk who were in the cohort that I went through. That was notable to me, but kind of like you just said as well, a lot of broadcasters going along with me. I actually it wasn't until my last class that I actually realized that I was in the same cohort as somebody who's just an hour down the road. So, I mean, it's just really great opportunity for connections. And I benefited a lot from starting during COVID, where Zoom kind of really did impact our classes a lot. They started having those Zoom weekly classes with the professors, and there'd be like a group of 5 to 10 of us that would show up, and it was great just to pick the brain of the professor, because they're not all strictly professors. They're all, I mean, quite a few of them are out working in the field. I know Sim is working as a, hurricane hunter,
Mhm.
that just to be able to talk to somebody who does that on a day-to-day basis is fantastic.
That's awesome.
I just like, yeah,
Um,
just like if I can quickly jump in and just as John said, so we have some really great faculty who are practitioners in the field. We had folks who are hurricane hunters teach our classes, our tropical class, folks who have worked at the Storm Prediction Center, work in the National Weather Service, coordinating warnings. That's great operational, practical experience to be able to share with the students.
That was one of the things I liked the most about the program, was that you take a mesoscale class and you're learning from somebody who's at the SPC. You're taking the tropical forecasting class and you're learning from somebody at NHC. It was really impressive that they were able to bring that kind of faculty together for a program like this. It was just amazing. It was perfect.
And it wasn't just someone at SPC. It's Steve Corfiti.
Yeah,
who,
yeah, exactly.
Anybody knows about the weather community, Steve Corfiti has an index named after him.
Yeah.
And he's a legend in the mesoscale, like the severe weather, convective weather realm. So that was pretty cool. When I got like an A from Steve Corfiti in my, like I just like put that on my wall for like about a year. Just like print that out. Like, yeah. Funny story is that my old boss was Steve Corfiti was his best man at his wedding. So I was like, I told him I got an A from Steve Corfiti. You did what? So that was pretty cool. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, I definitely fangirled when I met Steve Corfiti. So your A is certainly something to be very, very proud of. So I was starting to ask about, if anyone wants to elaborate on why they pursued this certificate. And I kind of want to tie it together with this concept of, you were supposed to be able to walk away with certain types of knowledge that Steve laid out in his presentation. Has it played out that way? What do you end up applying more often than not? So this is a question for everybody.
Well, I guess I'll start since I'm off mute, but I think for me, what I found is that I become the neighborhood meteorologist for people, is that everybody now asks you about the weather. I decided to do the program because I had a lifelong interest in weather. I was actually working for a storm chasing tour company as a guide. So I was out on the plains and I really wanted to understand the dynamics better so that I could safely be out there and know like storm motion, understand storm formation, things like that. And, it was the thing that was interesting for me is going through the program. And honestly, what I had looked into the program before I started doing that. And I was like, I don't know, it's a lot of money. I'm like kind of on the fence about it. And then I talked to somebody who went through the program. I met somebody and it totally changed my mind. I was like, okay, I'm signing up tomorrow. So that's kind of what happened. And, what I took from the program is, obviously mesoscale stuff was my favorite because that's how my brain works. And that's what I was interested in. And so being able to take what you see on radar and what you see in the models and apply it to, okay, where's my target for going to see a storm? And what am I going to do once I get there? And where is it safe for me to be? And where's the storm going to go? So, it really made it very practical and I was able to forecast. I would do like virtual forecasts for where I would target and it would pan out a lot of the time. So it was really kind of cool to watch things like be able to look at the data and see it come together. I also did the weather challenge after I graduated to kind of continue to build the skills. And I did that for a few years. I actually won over the overall competition for one of the cities, and then came in second. I did 2 in a row. I won 1 overall, and then I won the professional forecasters division, the second for the next city. So that was my luck, and then I should have quit after that. But but it was great, to have it all come together and to be able to like finally have it click in my brain that this is the dynamics that impact how you forecast and have it work and have it show in the results of the competition. And for anybody who doesn't know, there's typically 1,100 forecasters and they're from undergraduate to PhD to professional forecasters. So to me, being somebody who went through this program, who had no other weather training, who was able to win that, I just thought that was kind of phenomenal. So it gave me the tools to be able to do that.
I will say this, and Steve probably can relate to this, but we had to forecast for the weather challenge. When this counted for my grade, we had to do Ketchikan, Alaska, and that has scarred me for life. I will never go to Alaska. There's not reliable data to rely on there. So that has scarred me for life. But I'll piggyback on what Jennifer was saying. I pursued this because WHSV was out of their minds and hired somebody with no experience. And I wanted formal training, and this was a cost-effective way to do that. I knew a lot coming in, but not, I mean, very rough around the edges in terms of making a good forecast. And what I really appreciated, especially when I got to the fourth class, because I mean, you're really talking about the nitty-gritty day-to-day forecasting. I would take things I learned that day and apply it in my forecasting that day. And it was tremendous. And I really like the class because it cuts out, I mean, I've never taken the bachelor's degree, so I can't speak to every course that's taken, but I just feel like it was, here's what you have to know to forecast well. And it was no fluff. Here's everything you need to know. And it was, here's the, where the models fail, and here's where you have to watch out for all of these things, and then make a forecast that you think is good. And then you take the weather challenge and you realize how humbling that can be, because it's very hard to be consistent. But that's the goal. It's not to be right one time, it's to be consistently good. But now that I'm out of that field, kind of like Jennifer said, I'm the office meteorologist. Everyone asks me what's going to happen, and I'm happy to do it. But there are days where I can't look at it and I'm like, I don't know. I can't tell you. But I also like looking at, I still follow the local forecasts, and I like to kind of look at theirs and then do my own and compare them. So it's fun to keep things relevant. So I did it out of necessity. Now it's more out of just kind of hobby.
Mike?
I mean, pretty much a lot of what I can repeat a lot of what other folks have said. I'm kind of weird, is I was working at the National Weather Service when I started this job. I was at the National Weather Service for 8 years as an emergency manager and a policy analyst. And I was doing operational work. I was working at the National Operations Center. But part of the National Operations Center is other people are doing the forecast, and we're just communicating the forecast to decision makers and helping them guide them through their decisions. And I have been a weather geek all my life, and and being around a bunch of meteorologists, like literally flanked by them all the time and talking to them and hearing them. I knew a lot going into the program, but there was a little bit of like, I don't know if you want to call it imposter syndrome a little bit sometimes, where you're just like, but I don't really, I thought I knew a lot about the fundamentals. And then when you start taking the course, you're like, oh no, I needed to know more about the fundamentals. My biggest regret about the course is I didn't do it back in like 2010 or 2011 when I first started working at the Weather Service. I started at the end. In fact, I was partway through my program when I moved over to FEMA, my current job. And my job is effectively de facto regional meteorologist. I very carefully, it was one of the other folks in another emergency manager in the chat, who's a graduate of the program, struggles with it. Like, I don't call myself a meteorologist because I did not go through 4 years. I did not do like some of these foundations classes that are notorious. But effectively, though, what I do in my job is people treat me like that, just like folks have said. And it's really important to know these fundamentals. It is and especially knowing the patterns. And my job, knowing a week and a half out, when you start to see some of these, the synoptic patterns that spelled complete disaster for the Mid-Atlantic in prior storms and prior situations, like to recognize that and to recognize a lot of the various variables and what to look for, to kind of be able to then go speak to the Weather Service, who I work very carefully still in this job, or very closely with, and be able to speak fluently with them is very important. And so that's a big thing too. Is just when you start dropping orographic lift and all this stuff, they're like, oh, I know, I'm talking to someone who knows what they're talking about. And that's good for them to build trust too. And it doesn't take, and for those who are kind of like, I like to be the weather person at my job, it doesn't actually take that much to be that person. But I'll tell you, this certificate program will most certainly make you qualified to play that type of role. in your workplace, in your team, your community, as far as you know, this kind of like weather enthusiast, you know, great above a weather enthusiast, but again, not entirely a meteorologist. Again, you got to be careful about that because there's still one of the things about the program is I wish I got more. And I'm not saying, I mean, it's the opposite of being unsatisfied. I was very satisfied. I was so satisfied, but I wanted more and more. It's like, can we have like 5 more courses? Because this is great. So like that's what I mean by that. There's still so much more I need to learn. And I'm very glad that other people still have to do the forecast. I still gotta get to be a little bit of an armchair person because it's not my fault if something goes wrong. But it's still good. You know, I joke, but it's like, it's still good to have that foundation.
Yeah, anyone else want to talk about, because this has come up a few times in the chat already. What do you consider yourself? Are you a meteorologist? You know, do you think that there's any kind of job title that can be associated with having gone through this program?
Go. I was going to say, I just call myself a weather forecaster. That's what I call myself.
Okay.
This question was actually asked of Steve in our last cohort, one of our last Zoom calls, and the question was laid at his feet. What do we call ourselves now? And I remember the answer that he gave us in terms of what the employer, because this was more for our employer in the broadcast world. I wasn't called meteorologist until I finished the course. So I was called meteorologist on air, but if you go on Twitter, there's a very different answer to that because people on Twitter don't like that answer. But Twitter is also not the place you should go for answers. Yeah, so I'm just saying people have opinions there. I don't know what I would call myself. I mean, I put it on my resume, so I guess that makes it meteorologist. But I wouldn't say I'm at the same level as someone with a bachelor's degree, that's for sure.
And I'm lucky enough to have a job that has like weather in the name. So I don't have to worry about, you know, calling myself meteorologist because I'm like, I'm the hurricane program manager, take that. Like, you know, like that's like, I don't have to worry. I just really don't have to worry about that. Although again, like people are like, what exactly do you do? I'm like, well, I'm a hurricane planner. It's like, what does that mean? I'm like, well, you know, and then you kind of explain it, emergency manager, but I do a lot of weather stuff. And sometimes I'm kind of like a meteorologist. That's like what I said. I kind of like, or I'm a weather analyst is like is probably what I would say on Twitter is I'm a weather analyst. Like, I try not to forecast that much actually in my job just because a lot of other people are doing it and I get to look at other people's work. But there's still a degree of forecasting involved what I do, but I analyze. I'm like, oh, well, we can do this, we do that. And it's a little different if you try to parse words, but I think weather person, you know, I celebrate Weather Person's Day. We're weather people. Like that at some point, I don't think it matters that much. Like, although I still would be very careful not to call yourself a meteorologist out of respect for the people who, you know, had to go through the rigors of it in the math. But anyhow, yeah.
I would say that question comes up most frequently in the broadcast community. And as with John's class, you know, that tends to be decided by employers and it can vary from station to station in terms of what they're comfortable with or what they want to call you for whatever their reasons are. But you know, folks are working with weather in such a wide variety of backgrounds that they might be doing weather things at their job and weather might not be in their title, kind of like what Mike said. And I think that happens a lot.
Okay. Steve, do you want to answer the questions about cost and whether this program can go to international students here or somewhere else?
I can answer them here. So yes, it's open to international students. We have international students come through the program. World Campus does require for all their courses, not just in our program, but they require English competency because the courses are delivered in English. But but other than that, it's open to anyone who, you know, can access the courses. And cost. So cost is basically equivalent to Penn State in-state tuition at some of the branch campuses. The current number is $620 per credit hour. You know, that can vary. The Board of Trustees sets that number along with every other Penn State class. But that's the current number. And of course, as students go through the program, they are typically enrolling in and paying for one class, which is 3 credits per semester. So it does spread the cost out over, in a lot of cases, about a year and a half.
Gotcha. Let's see here. I'd like to know from all of our alumni, how did you balance your studies with all your other responsibilities? I saw a pretty strong reaction from John on that one. So why don't we start with you?
Okay. So my first class conveniently was summer of 2020, where I was home all the time. I was a teacher, so I had the summer off anyway. So that worked out. Then in the fall, we were teaching virtually. So that kind of worked out too. I could jumble things. Also had a young toddler at home, which makes it not as easy. And then things got hard because then I got the job at the station, and then life hit hard because you're juggling a new job, a new sleeping schedule, which made me very much appreciate that it was a weekly rhythm, not a daily rhythm. But it got hard. I mean, I remember that first spring in February in Virginia, we had sleet storm after ice storm after sleet storm, and I was slammed with forecasting, getting up early and all that stuff. And I had to juggle that with class learning about severe weather, which was hard because I'm like, I have to forecast snow and I'm learning about tornadoes, and this is really hard. So it can be challenging, but I really like that the professors are willing to work with you. So if you have a week that is just awful, you can reach out to the professors and say, what can I do? I am so slammed. And they're willing to work with you if you give them enough notice. So they know that work and life and school is a thing. And so I very much appreciated that there was that flexibility. But yeah, it can be hard, but I loved that you knew every Friday there's a deadline and I could figure it out when during the week I could finish.
Yeah, so my daughter was born, I think, right with 1 week left of my program, which was very
Nice.
fortunate. Like, yeah, I was like, and I remember Steve probably remembers, I was like, can I get a extra couple days to get something in? But the job I had, like, for instance, part of my job is I deploy the Hurricane Center if we get a threat in the Atlantic. If you remember Dorian 2019, so I deployed down during Dorian. And so Steve was also very lenient that week, although it was like early in that 4th course. So I think we actually didn't have many assignments due, if I remember correctly, because we knew that the bulk of it was going to be the weather challenge, for the latter 2/3 of the course. So it was workable. And what I liked about it is it's very challenging. Like this is not a easy, like I don't want to, like, I don't want to scare anybody away. It's going to be very practical and understanding. If you like weather, you'll like this course. But it's not easy. It's a for real course, and you are being taught, and you're held to a standard. And I was able to be on the train in the morning. So for instance, every morning, an hour train ride, on the way back an hour. That's where I do a bulk of the reading. And the reading's great. I like because the reading is each weekly session is broken up into like 10 separate subsections for each topic. And some of them are continuation, same topic. So it's very digestible. So it's like, if you can't sit down, like if you have like, okay, I got 20 minutes, I can get this done. And still kind of feel like you just completed something. It's great in that regard. There's a lot of tools there that they, like Steve showed you some of the animated tools to help you kind of understand this from a different perspective. It does take a lot of time. And I'm glad I got it done when I did, because COVID got busy and other stuff, 2020 hurricane season got busy. So like, I'm glad I got it done, and plus the fact that I had a kid. But I think it's still doable. I think I still would have been able to get it done. Especially during COVID. The first part of COVID would have, like, I wasn't really doing anything else. I was taking care of a kid and working. So yeah, but I think it's doable.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those programs that you get out of it what you put into it, with anything. And I would say it's probably about 10 hours a week is what a reasonable amount of time is. My challenge was that at the time I was working for a company, I was the head of product development, and I was traveling all over the place. So there was one time I had to fly to Korea. So I was literally on an airplane for like 30 hours at some point, or in an airport. And then I get there and my forecast is due at 6 a.m., which was kind of a challenge. So I think, it's just stuff like that. Sometimes you got to make it work, but sometimes your forecast has to be submitted really early. So it really, there's ways to work around it. And like John said, everybody was really flexible if you had a major problem. So if something wasn't going to work. So I think, people are willing to work with you. They're not working against you. They want to help you out. They want to make sure you're successful, but it is up to you at the end of the day. So, I mean, you can't go to them every week and say, make an excuse for something. You have to, you really need to put in the effort, and it's, up to the person at the end of the day.
Also say what I really liked, they would always, so like every week was a module, but they would always open up either the next one or the next two that you could work ahead if you knew you had a busy week coming up. So you could kind of plan out your next few weeks if you knew you were going to be slammed.
So I think that there's a question in here about tests, and just want to get that like very directly and explicitly answered. Are there formal exams?
So there's weekly quizzes in a lot of the classes. It's kind of smaller scale. We don't usually do like semester long exams. We tend to do more project-based learning with case studies. And then later in the program, in the last course, we're doing assignments where students are focusing on forecast mistakes that they made. So they're written assignments. So it's really not, other than the weekly quizzes, there's not big long exams.
Nothing really felt high stakes like that. Like so it's very broken up. So it's like if you had a week where you got like maybe not the greatest grade, you're like, it's not like, oh no, it's like, well, okay, I'll just do better next. It's and it really was, well, now there's a couple things where I think it was the end of the fourth class, like the capstone type class. We did, we had to talk to Steve for an hour, and we had a very detailed discussion. We had breaking down a forecast, breaking down an analysis, and like there was stuff like that, but it's all felt very much like a practicum. In fact, the highest stakes thing is the weather challenge. Like that's felt like,
yes,
it's basically like if anybody's played fantasy football, it's like that, but like you get more obsessed with it than anything. And like that was, it was like that was the thing where it's like, and if you mess up, like, and if you get one day where, especially if you get like a front moving through,
it's over.
and and you get too much rain, and because it's if you ever one of the forecasts just goes awry just a little bit, you're done for as terms the rankings go. You're not done for in the class wise, but you're like, you can still pass the course if you have a bad forecast, but you're still your pride, because I'll tell you, one of the proudest days of my life is when it was like halfway through one of the C challenges, but it was like a week and a half in, and I was like, not only was I number one at Penn State of all places for meteorology, but then I was like 5th in the country that day. That didn't last long, but for one day, and I work with a lot of Penn State alumni, so I was like, look what I did. And it was like, that felt really good. But I think that might have been the Dallas one, and I think that front moved in toward the end, and hopes and dreams are gone.
Gotcha. Jennifer, did you have anything you wanted to add?
I think they've pretty much summed it up pretty well. I think I've said what I can about it. I think, like I said, the weather challenge was a really great experience. I continued it after I graduated the program, and that's when I won, which was sort of interesting, like to build on that. It is kind of a fun experience when you see your name up at the top, but so I can second what Mike just said. It is kind of cool. In terms of balance, I think we talked about that a little bit. I mean, I love just looking at clouds and things like that, and just going outside and knowing what the dynamics are, like going, oh, there's a boundary, like I can just look at the clouds and know there's a boundary there. And I think there's just a lot of really fantastic things that you're able to do when you come out of the program, like just look at the sky and know what's going on.
you look at the world a lot differently.
You absolutely do.
Yeah.
It's true. Yeah, one
I
thing.
love that. That's one of the things you get out of it, because that was my favorite thing about the Penn State program. Trust me, my favorite thing wasn't the math that you mentioned earlier.
I have a math background. I kind of missed though. We didn't
like
get the math.
Oh,
I
you
know, I
wanted
like
to
math too.
derive the hydrostatic? Because, by all means. So there is a question in the chat, and I'm not sure if I misrepresent your question, please correct me, John. But the question is about climate change. So is there any material in this program that touches on climate rather than just straight up weather and weather forecasting?
So most of our focus is short and medium range weather forecasts, because we're looking for things that can be predicted on those timescales, weather hazards. So in the last class, and this is actually relatively new material, we talk a bit more about forecasting extremes, which certainly has a climate change, can have a climate change connection to it. But most of our, things with climate change or climate change sort of reveals itself in longer term statistics, numbers of events over a period of time. And mostly our focus is the shorter term day-to-day forecasting.
But that said, one of the things that we have to learn now, it's not climate change, but climatology. We have to get into big time in that fourth course, because we actually have to do a climatology report for every single one of the cities that we forecast in the weather challenge. And that forces you to look at the local climate of the city. And you start, and yeah, granted, not exactly the same thing as climate change, but you start to see like what you're looking at over long periods of time. Like it does play a role, although, again, you can't rely exclusively on that for, you can blow a forecast based on just looking at that type of stuff. But I did felt like it helped me understand, like it increased my climate literacy quite a bit, especially with respect to rainfall. That's what really all the stuff you're going to learn about the rain as far as rainfall goes. That's going to play a role. And it also helps play a role when you understand the climate change paradigm overall. Like you can start to identify the good science versus the, some of the bad science we're seeing in the discussion. And it kind of I think it makes you a smarter climate change consumer. And I think, and it will start to have you understand some of these fundamentals and a lot better.
Also, what I forget which course it is, might be probably the tropical one, where this isn't necessarily climate change, but more large scale effects of what happens in one region of the world and the downstream effects of what happens, whether over the United States or whatever. So when you talk about La Nina or El Nino, things like that, monsoons, stuff like that. I really like when we start talking about the connections across the globe about why things are happening in different places. And that's one thing that I've, like, if nothing else about the course, and Steve hit on it in his slides, but the conceptual understanding, if you can get the concept down, you will be successful in the class, because everything drives on, can you understand what is going on and why? You may blow a forecast, but if you can understand why, it's usually because there was a lack of conceptual understanding, which I really appreciate that they strip out the math for that, because, you can get bogged down in that, but the conceptual part is so critical. And it's really helped shape me understanding when I see something, oh, why did that happen? And it can make more sense.
Yeah, and I also describe the program as like a practical. So it's really, like in nursing, we have practical nursing and like bachelor's degree nursing, and it's sort of the same thing where you learn how to do things that you need to do your job. Whereas like the bachelor's degree is more what are the mechanics behind it and the theory and all of that kind of stuff. So we get some of that, but we don't get it at the same level that a degreed meteorologist would get. We don't get the physics. We get physics at the conceptual level, not at the nitty gritty level. So it's like what you need to do the job, but without all of the theory and that kind of stuff. So, I mean, you're getting what you need to do the job. And yeah, I mean, I think that's the important thing. And like they said, it's conceptual, you're getting the conceptual pieces. And if you can understand that, so one of the things that helped me when I won Melbourne, Florida was the wind direction coming off the water, you're gonna, it's what would the impact be on the temperature if the wind direction's coming off the water versus coming off the land.
Yep.
And so like things like that, once you understand where things are coming from, where are the fronts coming from, which direction is the wind coming from, what are the hills, what are the impact the hills in the area have, what bodies of water have impact, all that kind of stuff comes together and it gets complicated. I mean, there's definitely cities I was like, I have no idea, because there are too many things going on at the same time and it becomes complicated. And then you sit there and you like have debates with yourself over a degree and you're like going out of your mind going, is it going to be 45 or 46? And then you're like, you get penalized for every 100th of an inch on the weather challenge. And you're talking about 2 inches of rain and you're like, okay, is it 1.5 inches or is it going to be 2 inches? And then you get penalized if it's way off. So it's kind of crazy that you start nitpicking with yourself over little tiny things when you start looking at forecasts. And I'm like, okay, I don't want to be that person, but you end up being that person. But so it's kind of interesting, but it helps you learn the dynamics.
What's funny about the weather challenge, because I think we talk about this in the class, like it's pretty, as a forecaster, you should never tie yourself to one number when it comes to rainfall, but they force you to in the weather challenge, which is very, very difficult. That's why you obsess over 1/10 of an inch of rain. But yeah, there was, I just saw a few questions that popped up and I know we talked about the math. And I mean, the courses are stripped of the high level math. So if you can add or subtract, multiply and divide with a calculator, you're fine. But they do add in like the calculus things as kind of like an add-on if you want to look at that. But it's not required to be successful at all.
The hardest math related thing you have to do is just getting used to Celsius.
Yeah, that's true.
And like,
Yeah.
and trying to understand a SKU-T, like, like that's like,
fair.
yeah, but we're talking about like, it's really not that hard.
But the
Back to
SKU-T,
employees.
and the SKU-T is like really great because once you understand it, it tells you so much. And so to me, that's like one of the best things about that. So I just think it's awesome. Anyway.
SKU-Ts are so fun. So fun.
Yes.
Absolutely.
I'm about to get kicked out of the room I'm in because they close at 8. So I am going to toss it back to Gideon. But thank you so much to this wonderful panel. Just based on the quantity of questions that have come in, I would say that our guests have been very engaged in this. And I think that, Steve, you're going to get a lot of follow-up. Gideon, back to you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you, Erica. Ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, it does look like our time is about up for our allotted time for the presentation. So yes, panel and Erica, thank you so much for your presentation today. Folks, we will have this video available to Weatherband members at amsweatherband.org. Members, I know we didn't have the time to address all of the questions, anywhere close to that, but we welcome you to discuss on the Weatherband Community Forum. That's always a welcome place for things like this. We have, you can go to community.ametsoc.org/weatherband and check that out. And yeah, thank you all very much for joining us today. Again, we encourage you to join our community and make comments on there, and also to check out our mailing list. Let me put this on chat here to hear all about our up and coming webinars. But yes, that being said, again, panel, Erica, thank you so much for your time and for your work putting this fantastic presentation together. That was so much like awesome weather, like goodness, all wrapped up into one chunk. And yeah, the science nerd in me just absolutely crowed with delight at hearing all this input. So thank you again. But yes, without further ado, if nobody has any further questions, comments, or whatnot, I think we'll wrap up the presentation. All righty. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Panel. Thank you, Erica.
Bye.
Thank you, audience. Have a great rest of your evening.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.